Welcome to the ACE Clinician Podcast. Here is where you'll find advice, guidance, inspiration, motivation, and a place to challenge your thinking and expand your awareness of all things clinical practice for practitioners in the healthcare professions. If you're a sole practitioner, a leader of a team, a new grad, or someone who's been in the game for decades, this is for you. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast, The ACE Clinician, as it's been recently rebranded. If you listen to our trailer episode, which was recently released, you might know that we've changed things up a little bit now that we've come back to the podcast. We've had a bit of a hiatus, in fact, a fairly long hiatus when you think about it, but we're very excited to be back. A little bit of a change of pace and a little bit of change of face as well. So today and going forward, I'm now going to be joined by Erin Baker. If you're watching the video version of this, you can see her face right now. One of the key cogs in the machine that is ACE. I'm very excited to be co-piloting with Erin. Many of you, if you've been tuning in the past, will know Bo, my other previous co-pilot, and very excited now to have Erin on here with me. And Erin's the director of operations here at ACE and a brain of a clinician and with lots of experience of her own. I'll allow her to do a little bit of an introduction shortly, but if you may not know that we're going to mix things up a little bit going forward in that at the start of each episode, now we're going to start with a bit of a random question, totally and completely unrelated to the topic of discussion for the day. And while we will still dive into the same kinds of themes and ideas that we've done previously with the podcast, so don't worry, we're not changing up too much. We're going to sprinkle a little bit of magic at the start of each episode with some randomness, and which is something that Erin traditionally does in all of our meetings here at ACES. She turns up to the meeting with a question that no one's prepared with or for, throws it out there, and we all have to scramble to find a creative, interesting, or funny answer to, and it's always a lot of fun. So we're going to do that again today. Erin's got a question for us before we dive into today's topic, and the topic for today was suggested by Erin, so I'm going to allow her to do three things, Erin, if you don't mind. I'm going to stop talking in a second. You can start, which is one, introduce yourself and say hello to everybody. Two, throw the question across to me and then I'll feed it back to you for your answer, and then introduce the topic for today and we'll roll on into the episode. How's that sound?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Shaun. And thanks so much for having me here. It's really exciting to be joining you on the podcast and to be relaunching the podcast and taking it in some new directions. So thanks so much. For those that maybe don't know me or haven't met me, my name's Erin and I'm in Melbourne. I'm a myotherapist. I've been a myotherapist for about 15 or so years. I'm also a Pilates instructor. I've worked in private practice all that time, and I've also worked a bit in education as well. So I feel like I have a bit of an understanding of what it's like to be a clinician and to be that person in the treatment room day in, day out. So yeah, hopefully we can have some really fabulous discussions across the podcast. So as Shaun said, I love to get to know people and kind of find some interesting insights about people and hear some stories. And I think one of the best ways to do that is with said random questions. So to kick us off,
I'm
Shaun,
nervous, Erin. Just want to say I'm nervous.
yeah,
Could go anywhere.
that
Yeah.
little bit of sweat. That's all right. Don't worry. You're in a safe space and
Right.
no one's listening. It's fine.
Okay, good.
It's just all of us. All right. So I'd love to know what skill, if you had it, would make everyone you know hate you.
Right. Well, you can go a lot of different directions with skill. And look, my answer, I think, is going to be one that could be very, very useful skill to have. I think it'd be a fantastic skill to have, especially as an educator or a clinician. In fact, just about anybody. Now, to think of it, would be a fantastic skill to have. But when you have this skill in spades, if you're very, very good at this, then anyone around you would probably start to compare themselves to you and might feel uncomfortable. So I think this one would actually drive people crazy. And it would be the skill of being incredibly charming in the way that you use your language. And so always knowing the right thing to say at the right time, the right words, how to string them together, almost like everything that you say is poetry and drawn from, like, it's come to you from the gods almost, and it just spills forth. So I think that way of speaking in all situations, having high level of skill verbally, but also being charming at the same time, I think would drive all of your friends and family absolutely insane, because it doesn't matter what the topic is, you would come in with something so profound and it would
Mm.
just leave no room for anybody else. And so I think that would be the skill that would drive everyone nuts for sure.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there, because if we take that and package that in the package that is you, Shaun, we put that quality in there of this person that's already incredible at standing up at the front of the room good-looking rooster in a suit, heaps of knowledge in there, and then you just come out with this poetry, it definitely would make me hate you. I couldn't work with you. I would be too scared to be on a podcast with you. So, but I do think that you do have some of that quality. So, just not too much. That's okay. Yeah.
You're being too kind, but you're safe. Don't worry. It's definitely not me.
That's great. That's so great. I love it.
Well, let's flip this around. So, what would be the skill that would drive you, your friends, family, whoever, insane if you had it?
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, if I was able to sing really, really well, like we're talking like Adele,
Mm,
just that incredible range, no backing vocals needed, no soundtrack,
I get
just
chills. Yep.
yeah, just let it go because I love to sing and I sing often and I sing loudly and I think if you can kind of cope with that if when people do that around you if they're all right and they're just having a bit of a go and there's a bit of joy there but I feel like if I could sing like Adele it would just piss everyone off. You'd be like, well, how come you get to sing that well, without any training or any practice, just be able to let that come out. I think it'd
Isn't it?
tick people off.
That's a very good one. It's interesting. The thing that would make people hate you is the thing they compare themselves to. It's not even the skill itself. It's like, oh well, I can't do that, therefore I can't be their friend anymore. And truth be told, Erin, I've sat in a karaoke room with you before, and in a car while listening to and singing a lot of music. And you do have a voice. I'm going to say it. And I do sit there and think, well, I can't do that, so I'll maybe just hum under my breath. So while we're in the mood of dishing out compliments, you can hold a note. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I hold it, but then I do drop it. Yeah. We only get a few bars along and then I stumble.
Well, my notes run through my fingers before I can grasp it, so you're still up there, so well done.
That's great. Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks for sharing that. It's so nice to get a bit of an insight into
Yeah,
each of us there. Yeah.
exactly.
So then, with that said, why don't we dive into what I thought we could chat about today?
Yeah.
And I thought it'd be really interesting to have a little bit of a chat about values or guideposts, if you like. And this come up for me after we started talking about relaunching the podcast. And one of the first things that we started to talk about was, okay, well, what is the podcast? What's it about? What does it mean? What do we want it to bring? What are we going to talk about? What aren't we going to talk about? And really sort of set out those outlines for the podcast. And it also made me realize when I first started in my role at ACE as Director of Operations, I remember really clearly one of the first questions I said to you was, can you take me through what the values of the company or the business are? I really want to get a good understanding of what you do at ACE. And you took me through the values. And I think it's just such an important grounding fixed point for anyone. And when I talk about values, I really do mean values for yourself personally, but also values for yourself as a practitioner. And I'd love to get your thoughts on this as we chat. Are the values that you hold personally, are they different to the values that you hold as a practitioner? Maybe they're similar, or do you find that sometimes they are different or they can challenge each other? So I thought it'd be great to dive into that for as our first episode back and
I love
unpack.
this topic.
Yeah, yeah.
This is good.
Unpack it. What does it mean? Are they fixed? Are they malleable? Do they have flexibility? Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
This is such an important one, I think, because we could go, and we will go in a million different directions with this podcast and talk about sciencey things, nerdy things, academic kind of concepts and ideas. But we'll definitely go into personal skills, self-reflection, self-development, personal development stuff, because all of that makes up a clinician. You can't
Mm.
be and do what we do in clinical practice, where we kind of help people work on the quality of life for people, our patients, without considering the whole package of who we are and what we do and what we bring to the table or the clinic room or whatever it might be. So I really like this topic. And I'm also very conscious of the fact that so many people that I've met in the healthcare world over the years, some really highly skilled people that could bring some amazing things to this profession, just fade away. They're at it for a while and it gets too hard, or they lose motivation, or they lose track of why they're doing it. And it's usually at a time when they're struggling to get the income that they're chasing, or maybe they're getting a bit stale in the clinical work that they're doing, or they're missing something. And so when they're missing something and not quite sure why they're there doing what they're doing, they'll go, well, I'll just look over the fence. And that's where you find greener grass, right? And it's a dangerous thing. And I think that so much of the success that we achieve or acquire or get to in our life comes with time. You just need time. We overestimate what we can do in a month, but we underestimate what we can do in 10 years. And so you just need time. And the only way you can have the advantage of time is to stick to the thing that when it's hard, because there will be absolutely peaks and troughs on the roller coaster. And at the end of the day, you won't know what's possible until you actually just see it through. And I think the only way to do that is understand what those guideposts are, recognize your values, but do it before you start, right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and but to your point before, does it change over time? I think it does. But the self-reflection, the checking in on yourself is the key bit. So I think that the goals that I had when I first started wanting to study, and I was a teenager when I figured out this is the stuff I wanted to do. I was a bit weird as a kid. The goals I had then, no doubt, very, very different to the goals that I have now. But if you recognize what your goals are, your values, the values that drive the goals, then you can just check in yourself and go, is this a decision that is in line with my values? Am I taking actions that are in line with my values? And if at some point they're not, you can kind of go, right, are they changed because my values have changed, or have they changed because I've lost sight of the values? And those are two very different things, I think. So
Mm.
yeah, to have the advantage of time in something, there needs to be some intrinsic motivation, some intrinsic inspiration that is feeding beyond things like money or personal success or accolades or qualifications or business even. There needs to be something in you that is the driving factor of the why. The why is the key bit here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And probably a good place to start is that, yes, you have to kind of have these values. And if you don't know what they are, then you can't possibly live into those values and check in on them and expand. So if we sort of pause and go, all right, well, what are your values? What can you name them? And this was something that I found really challenging when I was starting out and I was much younger and would listen to these talks and discussions and read self-help books about identify your values. And I'm like, well, I value money. I value a roof over my head. I value food. And I was like, what are they talking about values? What do you mean? And something that I found really, really helpful was some work from Brene Brown. I'm a bit of a fan of Brene. I love some of her ideas. I think she offers some really lovely explanations on various parts of being a human, really. And so one thing that I found really useful from her was a list of values. And if we like, I can probably pop these in the show notes and credit Brene. I am taking these list of values out of her book, Dare to Lead. And on this list here, she has a whole range of different values. And I'll throw a couple out just to kind of maybe get your cogs moving and thinking about, okay, well, what are we talking about when we say values? So first one here is accountability. We've got balance, being the best, community, connection, contribution, dignity, diversity, family, harmony, inclusion, job security. That's a good one. Making a difference, nature, optimism, parenting. That'd be a big one, I know, for a lot of people. Self-discipline. That one drives me quite a lot. Sportsmanship, teamwork, tradition, usefulness, well-being, and wholeheartedness. And yeah, there's so, just to kind of get you thinking about, well, okay, what words could I use to describe my values? And in her book, she encourages you to have a look at the list and pick just two, which is incredibly hard. So a starting point can be that you circle quite a number and then slowly whittle down to really dive into what truly is the thing that drives you. What is the thing you hang on to on a dark, cold night when
Yeah.
things are getting hard? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. I love
Mm.
Brené's stuff too. And Erin, for the listeners, Erin bought me this book for Christmas last year as a thing that she thought that I might like to read, and she was spot on. There was something in there that really struck me, and Erin, you'll know what it is before I even say it, but this phrase plumbing or poetry.
Mm.
And I think we get so stuck in our work in the plumbing, right? And these two words are so there's a juxtaposition right there. Those two words, they're very, very different. So immediately your mind goes, oh, separation. There's two distinct in everything that we do in our professional lives, and I think even in our personal lives, there is plumbing and poetry. The plumbing is your day to day. It's the actions, the things that you do, and you've got to do those things. And those are the things that pay the bills, put the roof over your head, and buy you food. And so it's very easy to get stuck in that. The poetry is the intangible stuff. It's the value bit. It's the heart centered bit. It's the bit that really drives you from underneath that you can't always immediately see or tangibly put your hands on any given day. And understanding that bit is the answer to being able to do the plumbing every day without fail on the hard days when it's raining, in the dark, all of that stuff. And that's how I sort of see whether that's Brené's version of that explanation, that's what it means to me. And so today, I guess, yeah, that's what we're talking about is this poetry bit. It's the art alongside the science. It's the values alongside the actions. And so I am a big fan of another author by the name of Stephen Covey. He wrote a book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, which is one of the first books I ever read in my early part of my career is around personal development. And those seven habits are like, yes, this all makes perfect sense to me. And one of the key ones from that is begin with the end in mind. And
Mm,
if you can, you saying going back to the start of why we do things, like if you can project forward as to what's the ultimate goal, and it might be financial stability, it might be being able to not have to worry about money, it might be having a thriving business because of the, I don't know, satisfaction you get from that, but understanding what that is and then reverse engineering why that matters to you, I think is the key bit.
mm,
And so consider when you ultimately end up, you don't want to focus on short-term wins along the way. This is where I think we lose track of our values is we're like, okay, I want to have or do or be or become this person or do these things down the road. And that's a 30-year goal or a 50-year goal or a 10-year goal, whatever it might be. And then along the way, things will trip you up and you'll have hard times and difficulties and you'll go, well, I might make a decision here. I might actually go this direction and do this other thing because that will make today easier
mm,
and make today easier more often than not, I think makes that ultimate goal move further down the road. I'll give you a practical example from clinical practice. So let's just say that you come out of your training and you want to get into practice and you really want to have a patient-centered approach to the way that you work. Like you want to put your patient in front of you as the ultimate reason for what you're doing, right? And that makes perfect sense for a lot of us. And you might think, well, this patient would benefit from a little bit of something from me, but really they need to see this other practitioner or they need to help be co-managed by these other people. But that particular week that that patient comes to see you, the rent on your clinic went up
mm,
and your car needs a service and the kids need new shoes. And you think, okay, well, maybe this week, what have I got on my client list? Okay, maybe, oh, you know what? I reckon I could probably see that person again sooner rather than later. Should I try to rebook them and get them in? And this is where I think a lot of practitioners lose their mojo and they might be working for a boss and they themselves are a patient centered practitioner. They want to do what's best for the patient, even if it doesn't benefit them. But the boss has KPIs. They want you
mm,
to a certain rebooking rate that you have to hit. And if you hit that, then you get maybe remunerated a little better. So there's incentive there,
mhm.
of a carrot, targets or markers. You might get called into a meeting and there'll be discussions about why. And this is, I've spoken to lots of people in this situation, whether they work for themselves and fall into that habit or whether they work for somebody else and are kind of pushed in that direction. There's the potential for very, very quickly falling off the perch and not and losing sight of the values. It's like, why do I love doing this versus why am I doing this? And if we keep in our minds why we love doing this and try to work from that perspective, we make better decisions in the short term. And ultimately that buys us the time that I was talking about before to get us to the end point, the ultimate goal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And for me, I feel like what you're touching on there is like taking our values from this. So I can tell you something that's really important to me to actually like living that and making that part of our behavior. So if you like a bit of making it from BS to this is how I live, this is how I do it. The challenge or the question that I really have, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you feel that values are things that are quite fixed? If we talk about guard posts, is that a fixed solid post? Or is that something that has a little bit of give and a little bit of flexibility that for the in a particular scenario, perhaps that guidepost has to bend a little bit to allow the flow of life to pass by? Or do we need do you know, in order for it to be a value, does it need to be something that is a hard line for us? And I know we're edging into the concept of ethics here and where is the line, and so it's incredibly challenging. But what do you think? Do you think it's something that is flexible, or do they need to by nature be hard and
Yeah,
fixed?
that's a really good question, and I'd love to get your perspective on this too after I give you my answer. But I think values are a little bit like a tree in that the tree that will stand the test of time is a flexible tree. If that tree
Mhm.
is rigid, there will be storms, there'll be winds, and it will get uprooted, it will break, right? And so you want a strong, stable tree to be the foundation of whatever it is that you do in your life. But if it's flexible and it can move a little bit with the winds of time, it's going to withstand those storms. But there'll always be a point where it will break with enough
Mm,
force, enough wind, enough load, that thing will break, and it should, right? And like your values, there should be a stopping point. And I say should, we should never say should because everybody's version of reality is different. For me, I feel like that is should. So yeah, I've definitely allowed my values to be bent and flexible over the years at different times because you have to. Life
mhm,
comes at you, right? You just gotta
mm,
you gotta roll with it. But I think that ultimately there needs to be, or that for me at least, there is a point where you'll get pushed and bent and flex with it to a certain point but there'll be a moment in time where you kind of go, if I go 1 inch further, I won't be living within my values, or I won't be practicing as a clinician within my values. And I know we're talking very kind of big picture here. It might be difficult to relate this
Mm.
to specific things in day-to-day life, but from a high level perspective, yeah, I reckon flexibility is key, but also recognizing what that far hard boundary is. What is that end point, the bone on bone, to give a clinical example? How do you get to that point and no further without going over the edge? Because once you go over the edge, then I think you get down on yourself and you lose track of who you are and what you're doing. And that's where people fall off the perch. Like I mentioned before, they'll change careers like, nah, I'm not doing what I set out to do. I'm not getting the same sense of satisfaction. I'm not getting out of it what I was hoping to. I think that's where they end up there a lot of the time, which is why it's so important to understand what they are, the values in the beginning. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like similar. The reason I think I struggle with this in
Yeah.
particular is because I feel like one of my values is self discipline. And so I see that value of self discipline as holding myself accountable to the things that I decide are going to be important to me. And I can often have this back and forth tug within myself of like, all right, let's just give a little here. Let's just allow a little bit of flexibility around this particular issue or this particular thing that maybe is stretching my values or my ideals. And then my self discipline mode kicks in. I'm like, no, no, but you said it was going to be this. So why isn't it that, what, like, and probably, yeah, finding that hard point in of the tree a little bit sooner or earlier, and then my ever changing brain sort of flicks around and says, yeah, but if you're being self disciplined, it's also about recognizing and taking care of yourself and recognizing when something does need to shift and does need to give. So yeah, I find I do swing back and forth between the two. So I think it's a nice analogy to think about that bending. Where's that really hard point? Where are we going to hit that bone on bone, if you like? And then have the ability to self-correct as time goes on. Yeah, yeah. It's probably relates to the particular value that you hold. Yeah, and well, maybe it doesn't. Does it relate to the value that you hold? Because at the end of the day, if you're not living into your values, then you're probably not being true to yourself. So yeah, maybe it shouldn't differ based on your value.
These are questions we probably don't need to find a hard answer on it, but they're good
Mm,
to ponder and throw around.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can definitely empathize with or kind of feel that same sense of like the self-discipline for me. And I think in the earlier part of my career, I was highly singularly focused on certain goals and things. There was parts of me that I was trying to build and skills and different knowledge, and I would get quite frustrated if I couldn't stick to something for whatever reason. But I think the biggest thing that's changed for me over the years is I've just learned to be a little bit kinder with myself and recognize that life is long. It's a book of chapters. It goes on for a long time. So I get the self discipline bit, but I think probably for me now, it's more about endurance than self
Mm,
discipline. It's like if I can just stay the course, and some days I'm going to be at a 9.5, and some days I'm going to be at a 2. But if I can just stay the course, then that adds up over time. And
mm.
that for me at least has been a nice kind of shift. It's taken the pressure off, be able to like stay with the value, but be kind enough to myself to recognize that, okay, with enough time, I end up at the same place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That ability to zoom in and then zoom back out. Hey,
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
come in and see short term and long term. Yeah, I really like that. I really like that. I think I'd also love to unpack with you, are your values as a person, just a human living in the world, different to the values that you perhaps hold when you have your clinician hat on? Or do they change? Do you keep the same values? Do you shift?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think maybe early on in my career, they were somewhat different. But the more I go down the track now, the more I realize they're probably more and more similar. I think I'm finding myself in the later part of my current career, where I am now, I'm finding myself interacting with people and situations more similarly, both in private life and professional life. The
Mhm.
conversations I'm having are a bit deeper and a bit more meaningful. I'm probably leaning into some of those more than I did early on. Whereas previously in clinical practice, it would be more like, I've got a job to do. How can I help this person? What are the things I can do for them? Now, if I was talking to a patient or someone I was trying to help, or even in education, speaking to a student, which is for me kind of the same thing, it would be a case of what does this person need? How can I lean into that? What can I provide for them versus a little more black and white, which is what it was in the early days. So I think values now for me are about connection more than they
Mm,
were ever before. And Erin, you'll know this because I wrote this recently. Like I heard a saying a little while ago, which was they say it's not the destination that matters, but the journey. And for
mm.
me, it's the people. along the
Mm,
way. Like, that's the bit that matters for me.
mm,
People
mm.
that are on the journey with you, the people that you're doing it for, whether it's family or friends or whatever, like that for me is like a strong value. Even saying it hits me in the feels. So like that obviously means something.
Yeah, 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 that's it. It's people in the car ride with you that are singing along, singing the
It doesn't
same
matter how
song
good
as
they're
you.
singing. Doesn't matter how good they're singing. They're in the car singing with me, and that's all that matters.
That's it. Something that Brene talks a little bit about is, like who are the people that you surround yourself with, and particularly in the context of when you get hit with some like hard feedback or you get hit with some critique from someone and you can find that challenging. She sort of encourages you to ask the question of like, who's it important for you? Like, who do you count as your important people on your little square piece of paper that if you have to own up to something, then, who do you find really important? And encapsulated with that as well is who are the people that really help you and support you to live into your values and hold you accountable when perhaps you are straying a little bit too far from them. So I think that's really nice when you think about that idea of the journey of the people that are going with you on the journey, and hopefully they're those people that are holding you accountable to your values. And coming back to the example that you mentioned before of the clinician that's perhaps working and you've got that boss that's sort of saying, well, hey, there's KPIs. It'd take a lot of bravery, and because I've been in that seat, explain to me why you haven't met your rebooking KPIs. I think it'd be so lovely to be able to have the confidence and the bravery to speak up and say, well, it's meeting that KPI this particular month would have really meant that I would have had to gone down a particular path that didn't feel like it matched my values, and to be able to have the support from that leader that says, you're right, great. How can we find some ways for you to hit some benchmarks that can show me that you're working hard and challenging yourself, but feel more aligned with your values? I think that'd be such an ideal situation.
Great to have more leaders in the world like that. I think
Mhm.
it's funny when you're telling that story because I think about us working together, right? So, Erin, you work for me technically, but I think from a practical perspective, I work for you. You're the one that sets the targets and the goals and the timelines and the meetings, and then my job is I might pay the wages, but I'm also trying to meet those targets and goals. And I think that's why we work so well together is we've got the reverse balance in the reverse roles. And so there's no pressure on anybody. Everyone's just trying to do their best in the situation to achieve the outcomes. And we're both working from a value centered perspective. So that's a really nice place to be. I'm going to change gear a little bit and go to just talk about some author, or I'm not sure if he's even an author. He's a Japanese businessman who shared this idea years ago that I read about, and I use this a lot when I'm mentoring people, and I use it just even in sort of my personal life when someone goes, "I don't know what I want to do here," and this is a very practical thing I think anybody can use either with patients when they're trying to make a decision about where the patient wants to go, or to question themselves with regards to their own career or big life decisions. And so there's this Japanese businessman by the name of Sakichi Toyoda, and he came up with this concept of the five whys, which you've probably heard of this before, Aaron, because I've spoken to you about this. But the five whys, I think, is such a good exercise to go through to help you find your true value-based reason for doing things. And so for those who haven't heard of this before, you might have a question like, okay, I'm trying to decide whether I want to leave my current employment and go and start my own practice, or I want to decide whether I want to take on staff or just be a single operator or study again, or like it can be any question, right? It doesn't matter what it is. And so this, I think, works better when you have somebody else ask you the question and you go, and they might say, okay, why do you want to change careers and study again? What's the reason for that? And you would say, well, I feel like my knowledge is not where I want it to be, and I want to expand my repertoire and my skills and blah, 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 whatever it is. Okay. So that then you have the person ask you again, why does that matter to you? And then you might go just a little bit deeper. And so it prompts you to dig to the next sort of the next layer of sediment in the earth. And it would be, okay, well, because I feel like at this point in time, I'm not servicing my patients as well as I could. And there's gaps in my knowledge. And I feel like I'm letting people down. And then the next question would be, why is that important to you? Why does that matter that you don't let people down? You go, well, I want to do my best. I want to always give my best. And I'm hypothesizing the answers here, but I want to be and become the best version of myself so that I can look back when I'm older and go, well, I gave it my all. And you go, okay, well, why does that matter? And you see where I'm going? So if you do this
Mm.
5 times, you go from I want to be more satisfied in my work to I want to service people better to I want to be more satisfied in my life to I want to be and I want to be. And eventually, I think what you end up with is the little gold nugget at the center of all of that stuff. That nugget is hidden inside a big chunk of rock that you think is the question that you can't answer. And you chip away and you go, oh, this is the bit. And
Mhm.
I think what we often find out is when you get down to the nugget, the answer is really obvious about what you should do. And it's often not the thing that you thought. It's often something else completely off the radar that wasn't even in your field of consideration. And it might mean doing nothing, but just changing the perspective about what you're currently doing. Or it might be going in a completely different direction because you realize you've lost sight of why you're doing what you're doing at the moment. So, 5 whys, you've got to go through each one of them and really challenge yourself to not just repeat yourself, but
Yeah.
to go through and go that little bit deeper with your reasoning. And every time I've done this or taken somebody through it, it's always surprising where you end up. And so that's a practical thing I think people could use in this situation.
Yeah, that is brilliant. And I can absolutely attest, definitely, if you want to try this, do get someone else that can listen with kindness, but also with a critical ear as well. Because having done this myself a little bit, you can sometimes get stuck in the loop and you're kind of giving the same answer each
Yep.
time. So that critical ear of someone to go, yes, but say more. Tell me something different there. Yeah,
Yeah.
dig a little further. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You need that
Brilliant.
critical ear from
Yeah.
someone. Yeah,
Hopefully that's
yeah,
useful
lovely.
for somebody because I think the whole
Mhm.
values question is a tricky one to answer. And I know when you and I had that conversation, you said, "Tell me about the values of ACE." I feel like I know them in my soul because ACE is a business expression of who I am to a large degree. But to be able to verbalize it was actually a challenge. We had to have a long conversation that went over several meetings to kind of for me to kind of bring it out. And I probably still haven't articulated it completely, but the values question, like what are your values, is exceptionally difficult to answer, which is why it's really important to try to work on that early and
Mhm.
progressively. And I think also not lock it in too hard, not lock it in as a scripture or, a stone tablet as this is what it is. Here's what I'm living by, and here's what I use to guide me going forward. And let's see where that takes me. And if I'm happy with that, we can revisit it. If not, we can change it. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 and in that reflection, that sort of regular reflection of how well am I able to, like, live into that value and align my behavior with that value? Because I think so much of being a practitioner, yes, is there's development and developing your skills and knowledge, but I really feel like there's so much personal development as well, and challenging yourself to develop as a person. I don't want to say become more well-rounded. That sort of is not quite what I mean, but really encouraging yourself to be the best version you can be. I think living into your values and checking in that you're doing that is one way of that personal development as well to make you, at the end of the day, a better practitioner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
And then the question, of course, Erin, is for all the busy practitioners again out there,
Mhm.
and this is coming back to the reality of life. They'll go, but when do you have time for this? Who has time to consider values and go through this self-reflection process and ask myself these questions? I'm busy. I see 30, 40 hours worth of patients a week, and I come home to a busy household, and I've got to pay the bills and mow the lawn, and I've got to walk the dog, and I've got to when do I just have time to do this? And Erin, tell me the answer to this question, please, because I think everyone needs to know that.
That's it. I do some of my best thinking in the shower. Do we
Right.
not have all of our great ideas in the shower when you don't have the capacity to write them down?
That's a very good point, and then by the time you
Yeah,
get out, they're gone, right? You
they're
gotta
gone.
write them in the steam-covered glass with your finger or something like that so you can come back to it later, but
Yes,
yeah.
yes. No, I probably haven't done this with you yet, Shaun, but stand by. I'm sure it's coming. In my previous role with my colleague, we would often talk about having great ideas when you're in the shower. So I'd get out of the shower and
Yep.
quickly send a voice message, and it would be called Shower Thoughts.
Oh, right.
And so,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
Shower Thoughts. Here are the two great ideas that I just had. So we're always sort of swapping back and forth shower
Great.
thoughts that, yeah. So stand by.
Well, that's great. I think everybody probably showers almost daily, and so that's a great opportunity to let your brain just kinda go, "What have I got in here?" For me, it's the airport
Mhm.
drive. My life is somewhat very different to most people's probably in that I go to the airport a lot, and I have about an hour and a half to an hour and 45-minute drive to the airport, which can happen multiple times in a week sometimes. So, I have the airport drive, and all of my team know that they will get voice messages from me incessantly when I'm on an airport drive, and even my family, if I call them, they say, "You're driving to the airport, are you?" Like, that's the time that I call them because it's the only time I can't do anything except think and watch the road. So, yeah, maybe
Mhm.
the answer to the question is find the pocket of time in your day or your week or your month where life's not coming at you and you
Mhm.
can just let it all flow.
Definitely. I always think of those tasks that you can do where you don't really need to think. You know that you can just hook in. You're in your flow state, if you like.
Yep.
You can do those, and it gives my brain the time to kind of open up and have some freedom. Cooking's another one.
Oh, yeah.
Like I can sort of cook and just really enjoy myself in that process often. So that I get a lot of thinking done while I'm cooking. And if I'm sharing the kitchen with someone, it's often a nice time to chat out those ideas too.
Oh, Erin, we
So
are so different. We are so different in that. Cooking for me
yeah.
occupies 110% of my bandwidth because I'm terrible at it.
Yeah.
So I guess each to their own, right? That's yours.
That's it. That's it. Each to your own. Whatever yours might be, then,
Yeah,
lean into that. Lean into that. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think the thinking and the mulling over ideas, it is really hard sometimes to do it on the fly and not to kind of sound too much of the teacher. But your business plan at the start, if you're going into business, if you're setting up a particular pathway for your career, spending a little bit of time jotting things down or holding that idea in your head, if however you like to do it. I do think it's just so important to get that stuff right at the start rather than trying to build the plane while you fly it, if you like.
absolutely. Yeah. No, that's really good. I think that we're all got very, very different personalities, and trying to figure out how our brain works and then working to that rather than fighting against it is the key.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'll give you another little Stephen Covey quote. I mentioned it before. So this one I think fits into this concept really well, which is the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities, which is
Mm.
something that I struggle with. I'm going to be honest. You know this, Aaron. I'm not an organized thinker. I'll have ideas, I'll have brainwaves, and then I'll hold them in my head, and some of them make it to paper, and some of them make it to reality. And so which is why we work well, Erin, because you write everything down and you track it all to within an inch of its life. And I love that about you. That's fantastic. So, two sides of the coin between you and I.
Mhm.
But yeah, scheduling your priorities, I think, is also where you find extra time, probably in your week, to be able to do these kind of things. Going, okay, what's important? I'll start there. I'll write that down. Where does that fit into my week? And then work backwards from it rather than trying to chase towards it.
Yeah, that is nice, isn't it? Because you're always gonna prioritize the things that you wanna do. Yeah?
Or that are easiest,
You're the
lowest hanging
yeah,
fruit, you know? What can I get
yeah,
done so that I feel productive because it's easy to do, it's right there, versus what should I do because it's important? Yeah,
yeah, yeah, no, that's really nice, that's really nice. If you're a writer and a jotter downer and I love to kind of plan and see it all written out, that physical thing, get yourself to Japan, get yourself to some of the stationery shops,
oh,
get
yeah,
yourself kitted out with the full stationery kit, the stamps, the stickers, the pens, yeah, that'll really kind of light you
have
up,
all the
so
stuff, have all the
have all
stuff.
the stuff, have all the gear and
Right, well,
some
that
of
for
the
me, I would have all the gear but no idea. That would be my me in that scenario. It's like, I'd have all the things, but no ability to organize them. That's interesting.
Mm,
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Japan is good for that stuff, aren't they? They just take
Oh,
everything and make it so much better. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. They value, like, efficiency and beauty and the experience, the beautiful experience, I think, if I was to
absolutely.
say what Japanese value.
Exactly. Great. Well, this has been interesting discussion,
Mm,
Erin. We've gone off on a few different rabbit holes or down a few rabbit holes of this one. And it's
mm,
so easy, I think, to get lost in the bigger picture, hyperbole kind of the clouds rather than on the
yeah.
ground. And I hope that people listening have been able to find a few little practical bits and pieces from this, because that's the intention of this podcast, is not to give you high level concept based stuff. It's like, let's take a concept that's important and bring it back down to earth. And how can we put our feet in those shoes and walk with it? So I'm trusting and hoping that people have been able to take a few of those bits and pieces from today.
Yeah, yeah. So if we quickly recapped, like, what are some of the takeaways for me,
Yep.
listening to that you sort of brought up, the asking yourself the 5 whys and digging into that question, whatever the question might be really, but those 5 whys, dig deeper each time. That's a really big takeaway for me. And also there was like prioritizing that we just mentioned at the end there. So making the time to kind of prioritize what's important and schedule that in. Yeah, that were my 2 takeaways.
Yeah, cool. And from you, I think I got taking the time to first of all establish what your values are early in the piece, and trying to figure out how much flexibility you want to have with that, or
Mm,
is it appropriate to be flexible? Maybe one of your values is so set that
clear.
there's no room for movement on it, and you shave off
Mm,
all of the edges of it, and there's this hard wall, and that might be the case, and that's okay. But understanding what that is and knowing that when you come up against it, no, no, I'm going to push back versus I'm going to bend a bit here to see what opportunities or possibilities might be available to me, and recognizing, which is also a value in itself, flexibility, I guess. Like, are you a
Mhm.
flexible person, thinker, being, or are you like, no, I know what I want, I know what I'm working towards, and I'm going to stick to that. And so understanding yourself, understanding your values, how much flexibility there is in that, and then setting the course from there is probably what I took from today as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's fabulous. Well, thank you so much for diving into this with me on our first episode of the relaunch.
Pleasure. Thank you.
It's been lots of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in today. And thank you, Erin, as well, for joining me. And we'll see everyone, or you'll hear from us again soon.
If you enjoyed today's discussion, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of The ACE Clinician. You can also follow ACE on social media, visit our website for a range of other resources and information about what we do, and share this episode with a colleague or friend who might find it useful. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next one.